I'm not even gonna lie to you. This upcoming full moon in Gemini is gonna be a lot, but not a lot in the way that you're thinking. Typically, when you think of full moon, you think of lots of emotions, lots of intensity. I'm not gonna say that this full moon is gonna be the opposite of that. It's just gonna be kind of a different flavor. In a sign like Gemini, a full moon feels very mixy. It feels like a lot going on. Think of like multitasking with like 10 different tasks. That's what the full moon in Gemini can feel like. And this one is going to be a little different because not only are we going to have a curveball because Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, is still going to be retrograde at the time of the full moon, but we're going to have ample opportunity to learn. Like, that's the essence of the Gemini energy signature. And the universe has a favorite way of teaching us, and usually it's through challenges. And so that's exactly what this full moon in Gemini has in store for us. All right. So if you want to know more about the juicy details related to the upcoming full moon in Gemini, stick around. You definitely don't want to miss this. Hello, my loves. As always, I hope that this video finds you well and in excellent spirits. So, if you are new around here, my name is Mel. I'm a professional astrologer. I'm also a sound therapist, and I'm the founder of Divine Feminine Works, where I help people unlock their divinity and discover their magic. And as always, if you are returning, welcome back. So, today's video is all about the upcoming full moon in Gemini going down on Sunday, December 15th at 4:01 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at 23 degrees of Gemini. So, like I said before, this is going to be a lot. It's going to be the essence of Gemini energy, which we all know is mixy. I always liken Gemini energy to that of a toddler. And I mean, no shade to any Gemini placements, right? But it's very youthful, it's very active, it's very communicative, it's sort of running all over the place, right? And when you have a full moon in the sign of Gemini or a sign like Gemini, it's like showing you all of this activity. You know how you've seen those videos, right, of the nervous system and how it looks so electric or how electric current runs through circuits. It's like this full moon is going to shed light on the circuitry, on how things are moving, on our communication and our thoughts. And like I said before, we're going to learn some things, but we're going to learn through challenges, right? But Gemini kind of likes that energy. Gemini likes a good challenge. Gemini likes to be adaptable and flexible. And this full moon is going to give us ample opportunity for that. All right. So let's get into the juicy details regarding this full moon. And of course, we start off with the basics. All right. So let's talk about full moons and let's talk about Gemini energy. So full moons mark the halfway point in the lunar cycle. It's when the sun and the moon are in opposition. So, with the moon in Gemini, it means that the sun is in Sagittarius, of course, because we're in Sagittarius season. So, the full moon during Sagittarius season typically is always in the sign of Gemini. And so, the full moon is when the moon is completely illuminated, right? And so, it does two things: it either sheds light on things that were in the dark before, or it signifies the culmination of something. Right? If we're talking about manifestation, this is when your manifestation comes to fruition. If we're talking about running a race, this would be when you cross the finish line, right? It's the grand crescendo in the manifestation process. And so full moons can typically denote endings or a finale or a graduation, but it can also be a time of serious illumination. And in a sign like Gemini, this illumination comes in the form of learning. Gemini is a sign that's all about ideas and communication. Gemini is the sign of the mental. It's ruled by Mercury, so it not only governs like our talking, hence communication, but also our thinking. It is speedy, it's very active, right? Like I talked about, Gemini being like a toddler. Yes, that's all part of the Gemini energy signature. And so, in a sign like Gemini, we're all about learning and thinking, how we relate to other people via communication, how we learn specific skills. Gemini is also about messages, hence communication. In Greek mythology, Hermes as represented by Mercury, right, was the messenger of the gods. And those slippers with the sandals with the little wings on them, Hermes had those so that Hermes could go back and forth and flit about all over the place. And so, anytime we have any kind of Gemini transit, anytime any planet is in Gemini, whether natally or by transit, it kind of denotes like busybody energy that's very multitasking, that's very mixy, that's very communicative and active. Again, hence like a toddler. When you put the full moon together in a sign like Gemini, it sheds light on all of this communication, on all of this speed. It gets us to learn things, perhaps things that were right in front of our faces, but we didn't notice before. Or it brings something that's Gemini like to a completion or a culmination. You're going to definitely want to check out where Gemini is in your natal chart. This is where you can experience this illumination, this learning, and or this culmination. All right, so those are the basics. Now let's get into my favorite part of the video, which is where we talk about the numerology. All right. So, this full moon in Gemini is happening at the 23rd degree of Gemini. And so, this full moon is sponsored by the number 5. So I talked about Gemini energy being mixy, but did you know that the number 5 is associated with the sign of Gemini? So this full moon has an extra flair when it comes to Gemini energy. Okay. It's extra Gemini y. Now, the thing that you need to know that's the most important about the number 5 is that it is a number of change. It's like a pivot. The number 5 represents the energy of like a go between, like a messenger. The number 5 is very flexible, it's very adaptable, it's very mutable, which again adds to the Gemini flavor of this full moon because Gemini is a mutable sign. So everything about this full moon may have you needing to adapt or be flexible or be open and receptive to change. Remember I said the one thing you'll know, or the one thing that this full moon is going to deliver to us, is that we're going to learn something, and we're going to learn through either a challenge or a change. And so this is very evident as expressed by the number 5, right? With the numerology of this full moon. Okay. Now, the master of change and adaptability, it's about being unattached. So, one of the hallmarks of the number 5 when it comes to the energy vibration is this element of detachment. You can't be flexible and adaptable if you're stuck in the mud, if you're rooted, if you're grounded, if you're firmly planted. It definitely is not conducive to flexibility. And so it's really important that whatever transpires around this full moon, that you detach either from it or from the outcome. Okay. It's almost like, I'll never forget. I remember I was going into high school. So I was graduating 8th grade, going into high school. And I remember I was having a conversation with one of my classmates' mother. Looking back, I'm like, why would this woman be talking to like a 13-year-old? But regardless, she's talking to me and she's like, I was explaining to my son that it's like, so you've climbed the ladder and you've gotten to the top of the ladder, right? You're graduating 8th grade, only to go to the bottom of the next ladder, which is high school. So I bring up that story to say that as great as it may feel to finish something is just the start of something new. Hence detachment, right? Don't get attached to the outcome. Don't get attached to, okay, I ran this race and I finished and that's it, right? No, there's always something new to do, always something new to learn, always some new activity to get into. And again, Gemini loves activity. So be detached from the outcome or from whatever's happening, right? Perhaps this particular full moon is showing you where you need to pivot and change, maybe where you've been a little too stuck, right? And so detaching from the thing helps you pivot, helps you change, helps you go in a new direction. So that's really important. And this is the energy signature of the number 5. So whether you like it or not, the universe is kind of going to make you do it. Okay. It's non-committal. It can be unreliable and directionless. Now, this is the other thing about the number 5. While it's great for flexibility and change, it can be aimless. Think about multitasking, right? You can get a little bit of a lot done. So you can have like 6 different projects started, but when it comes to crossing that finish line with all 6, multitasking doesn't necessarily fit the bill, right? And so this could be showing you perhaps where you've been a little aimless, a little directionless, a little too scattered, right? Which is great because with the retrograde season and all of that stuff and the new year coming up, this can help you focus and sort of hone in on a direction that makes sense for you. Now, in terms of the astrology associated with the number 5, it is associated with Leo, since Leo is the fifth sign of the zodiac. And Mars is currently, or at least will be retrograde in the sign of Leo. So we've got that slowing down period as it relates to even this full moon in Gemini. And if you want to know more about Mars retrograde, I just dropped a video on it. Link will be in the description box below. It's also associated with Gemini and Virgo. So, Gemini and Virgo are not only both mutable signs, but they are both ruled by Mercury. Okay. And so, this sort of gives that very logical, very communicative flavor to this full moon, particularly this full moon in Gemini, which is happening at the 23rd degree. Additionally, in terms of the tarot card associated with the number 5, it is associated with the Hierophant. And what most people don't realize is that the Hierophant, right? It's this depiction of like a pope like figure with two people sort of prostrated in front of him. The Hierophant is the go betweens between heaven, right, and the people. And Hermes was the messenger between the gods and the people. Hermes was the messenger between heaven and hell. Again, this also bodes well with the number 5 because the number 5 represents this energy of a go between, a messenger. So, apart from everything else I just discussed with respect to this full moon in Gemini, messages, messengers, advice, people being the go between or the mediator, even in certain situations, may come to light as well. So you may be the messenger, you may get a message from a messenger. The theme of don't kill the messenger may definitely be a thing for you this full moon in Gemini. All right. So, needless to say, when it comes to the number 5, it is all about change, adaptability, pivoting, detachment, and go between energy. Now, the other thing that I like to examine when it comes to numerology is the Sabian symbol and the Sabian symbols. And the Sabian symbols are archetypal stories for each degree of the zodiac. And so, for the 23rd degree of Gemini, it is carefree children skating on ice. Okay. So, let's take that in two parts. Carefree children. I think I said this ad nauseum already, right? Like that Gemini energy is youthful. It's like a toddler. So carefree kids, kids running all over the place, free, unfettered, doing what they want, mixy, all into everything, right? But then the second part, skating on ice. Now, depending on where you're skating, this may not be an issue. Like if you're at an ice rink, presumably it's solid enough where you wouldn't fall through. However, if you're skating on a lake or something, there's this concept of having to be careful, having to be cautious. Because although you may be skating on what looks solid, you actually may be skating on thin ice. And this is where I think the challenge comes in with the energy of this full moon in Gemini. You may be skating on thin ice. Maybe this full moon is showing you something to be cautious about, right? You know not to skate over there because the ice is thin and you may fall. So this may be forward looking, right? Like what you need to be cautious of, what you need to avoid, what you need to do so that you don't fall through, or that so plans don't fall through. Or you could be skating on thin ice and you fall through. And now you got to pick yourself up. You're cold. You got hypothermia. You got all of this other shit, right? You learn from that lesson, right? You learn that maybe that section of the rink is thin ice. Or when I skate on thin ice, I can fall through, right? There's lessons to be learned through challenges, having to pivot. If you know that you can't go over there, maybe you got to think quickly and redirect yourself in a different direction, right? Pivoting. That's definitely the energy of this full moon in Gemini. All right. So now that we talked about the numerology, let's get a little technical and talk astrology. All right. So let's talk astrology. So I already mentioned before that the full moon is when the sun and the moon are opposite. So if the moon is in Gemini, the sun is in Sagittarius. So clearly we are in Sagittarius season. But the other thing that I want to bring your attention to with respect to Sagittarius is that Mercury is in Sagittarius, and at the time of the full moon will actually still be retrograde. So, you know how I talked about Gemini energy being about communication and how we relate to people and all that stuff? Well, with Mercury, the ruler of Gemini, retrograde, it means that when it comes to expressing ourselves, when it comes to communicating with people, gonna be kind of fucked up. There's gonna be some miscommunication, misspeaking, misunderstanding, all of that stuff. All right. So even though this is a full moon where we're learning, we're also communicating, right? Remember, I said Gemini is all about multitasking. So we're learning, we're talking, we're doing all the things, but understand that there's gonna be some miscommunication and some missteps along the way. Right. So that's number one. Number two, at the time of this particular full moon, Mars is also going to be retrograde. Now, I said this before because the number 5 is associated with the sign of Leo, and Mars will actually be retrograde in Leo at that time. So, when it comes to this ability to pivot, to change, to adapt and be flexible, everything that not only Gemini, but the number 5 suggests, because Mars is going to be retrograde in Leo, there's gonna be this energy of, like, wanting to change and pivot, but maybe not being able to, kind of being frustrated in doing so, okay? So don't be too hard on yourself, right? Understand that even if you're experiencing delays or things are stopped or you have to take a major detour, understand that everybody does. We're all experiencing Mars retrograde at the same time, and so pivoting and making a different move or going in a different direction may take a little more effort because not only is Mercury retrograde, but Mars will be retrograde as well. And then the last thing I want to talk about with respect to the astrology is that the full moon is going to be conjunct Jupiter. Okay. Now, this also, I like to call it cross referencing. So, you know how I said that the sun is in Sagittarius, right? And Mercury is retrograde in Sagittarius. Then I talked about how the number 5 is associated with Leo, Mars is retrograde in Leo. Now, the full moon is going to be conjunct Jupiter. Jupiter is actually the ruling planet of Sagittarius. So you see how everything connects together. Like you're connecting all the dots, everything cross references, right? So what this means is that this lesson or this enlightenment or this culmination is going to be big, okay? It's going to be larger than life because Jupiter expands, but not even so much in its magnitude. Whatever you experience under this full moon is meant to expand you. It's meant to help you grow. So it definitely might it definitely might push you out of your comfort zone, or it may require you to really go within so that you can expand your mind or, broaden your horizons. Understand that Jupiter is also retrograde as well. So again, this multitasking mixy energy that is everything I've been talking about, actually making the change, actually adapting and being flexible, it may be a little challenging to do so with all of this retrograde energy. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means that it may take a little more effort or it may take longer, right? But either way, the one thing I will say about this full moon is that not only is it meant to teach you, right? But it's meant to take you into a different stratosphere. It's meant to take you out of your comfort zone. It's meant to launch you into something else. And that's why there's going to be this need to be flexible. Because the universe is like, I know that you want to do this, but listen, you really need to be doing this. Okay. So change this up a little bit. Talk to this person, or this person's going to give you some advice. And you may find that because the way Mercury works, it works kind of fast, kind of speedy. Think about, like I said before, how the nervous system works or the electrical system works and how things just move really quickly. It may require you to move really quickly, or let me better explain this. Spirit may want you to move quickly. However, because we live in 3D and because things can be a little slower during retrograde seasons, your ability to move quickly may be hindered a little bit. So again, be easy on yourself. But most importantly, allow yourself to expand, allow yourself to grow, allow yourself to pivot, change, and launch into the next stratosphere. All right. So now that we've talked about all the technical stuff, let's get a little more woo woo and spiritual and talk about manifestation and messages from spirit. All right, manifestation. Real simple. This isn't the time to manifest. Whenever we're at the full moon stage, I like to think of it as the stage of observation. So at the new moon stage, you planted the seed, you've watched it grow from the new moon to the full moon. At the full moon, you have the apple or whatever seed that you planted, whatever fruit you planted at the new moon. You get what I'm saying, right? So you look at it, you enjoy it, right? Realistically speaking, did your manifestation come to fruition? If it didn't, what do you need to do in order to get across that finish line? So, full moons are all about observing. Like I said, it's a time of illumination. If you're too busy thinking about manifesting or doing this or doing that, you're going to miss what the universe is trying to show you, right? So, chill out and just observe. See what becomes illuminated. See what pops out from the shadows. See where the universe is trying to tell you, yo, there's thin ice over there. Don't skate over there, right? Observe. That's exactly what you're supposed to be doing at this stage in the lunar cycle. All right, so now let's get into some messages from Spirit. All right, my loves. So the message that Spirit imparted on me for this full moon in Gemini for you is really short, sweet, and to the point. And it surprised me because I thought that there would be a lot of messages, given the fact that this full moon is going down in Gemini. Gemini is all about multitasking. There's so much to learn. There is ability to multitask and, everything I've said before. But Spirit was like, nah, especially because we've got all these retrogrades going on. Mercury retrograde, Mars retrograde, Jupiter retrograde, right? Spirit is just like, I want you to open your mind. For some, I'm hearing there's been this mental fog or mental cloudiness that you've been experiencing for a while, right? Maybe you know the destination, but the route is not so clear. Or maybe you're trying to think of things, but your mind just seems to be cluttered with a lot of things. Meditation is going to be your best friend at this time because there's a lot that Spirit wants to impart upon you. Spirit showed me the sun, right? And how the sun dispels all the cloudiness, right? And the sun is source. So, meditation, really sitting, being quiet, reflecting is how you can the best activity that you can do during this full moon in Gemini. So, and I'm also seeing like, and this is not, I don't mean this in a graphic way, but I'm seeing someone whose head is like split open and not in a gory kind of way, but like, when you have a crown chakra activation and you feel like your head is sort of opening, that's what I'm seeing. And I'm seeing the sun coming in. Source has a lot to impart upon you. Source, God, the universe, whatever you call it, whatever you believe in. So much information, so much warmth and activation that this full moon in Gemini is going to give to you that can dispel those mental clouds, that can clear those mental cobwebs. But it's going to require you to pivot, right? Because again, it's like, oh, you got to take a detour. There's thin ice over there. So it's really important that you heed the direction of Spirit, allow time for you to download and digest whatever Spirit, God, the universe is trying to impart upon you right now. Remember, I said there is this theme of messenger, message, go between. I don't think it means that there's going to be an intermediary. I think this is the go between you and your highest self, you and God, you and the universe. That direct connection is going to be highlighted at this time. And perhaps if you've had a strong connection with source, I feel like this full moon in Gemini is going to be a time when there's a culmination, right? Maybe a manifestation is coming to fruition because you and source have been like this over the last 6 months and you've been heeding the directions that source has been giving you. Or maybe this full moon is like, listen, you need to get back to basics. You need to get back to yourself. You need to get back to source because source is like, I know where you want to go. I know what you're trying to do. Let me help you. Let me give you the directions. Source, your highest self, is the GPS. And maybe you've been trying to figure it out. I mean, we're in the year 2024, right? And perhaps, and I'm using this as a metaphor, it's like you've been using a paper map that was made in 1974 to direct yourself. And according to this map, you've had to go down this road, then make a right or whatever. And you do that and you realize, fuck, this is a dead end. Spirit is like, listen, you've been using this map. Like, I'm going to need you to upgrade. I'm going to need you to use this GPS. And if you look at the GPS, you'll realize that there was a dead end here. It's going to require you to what? Pivot, go in a different direction. Meditate. Just meditate. Meditate. Get right with yourself. Get right with God. Get right with spirit. And listen to what spirit has to say to you. Some of you are going to have major crown chakra activations at this time. Remember, I said this full moon is going to be conjunct Jupiter. So there's going to be this element of expansion. For some of you, it's going to be cranial, it's going to be mental, it's going to be crown chakra. Okay? Let it happen. Spirit has so much to tell you, so much to teach you. Spirit knows what you want, where you're trying to go. Allow spirit to drive the car for once. All right? All right, my loves. So that concludes this video on the upcoming full moon in Gemini. I sincerely hope that you were able to get at least one important piece of information that you could use going into this full moon. For information on all of my products and services, you'll either find it linked in the description box below or tagged to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. I wish you nothing but the absolute best for this upcoming full moon in Gemini and beyond. And I will see you in my next video. Take care.